All right, my dinner's ready, so let's make this quick.
That's going to be the cold open. This is Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast.
Hey, this is Liberty DeVito.
This is John Jackson, director of the Billy Joel Archive.
This is Russell Javers.
This is Mike Del Giudice.
This is Richie Canada, and you're listening to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. It's awesome.
Another year in the books, my friend.
Yeah, I'm doing this in reverse. When we started the podcast, I had a giant beard. Now I don't. It would make more sense if I had the beard down to my nipples now, This is why this is an odds and ends episode. Yeah. No, I had like a giant beard for like 2 years, and I cut it just happened to cut it like right before we all had to stay in our houses in 2020. So it might have been like right before our first episode, but we started recording so early that I had the full beard on like those first couple of Zoom calls.
I remember when you cut it. It was February. It was right before we did the Del Giudice and Malcolm interview, because you had set up the Zoom in the studio you guys were all at. So you fired it up. I joined the room. I could hear you talking, and then I saw this dude just walking in and out of frame, getting things set up. I'm like, oh, this cat probably works at the studio. And then sure enough, it was you the whole time.
Well, yeah, that was so long ago. Even just thinking about just the ridiculous rig that I brought up. For context, we're talking about our Doug Stegmeyer episode that came out in the summer of 2020, and we recorded it in like February. It just took that long because it was like we talked to a lot of people. We talked to Sue, his sister, and Kevin, his brother-in-law. We talked to Andy Gilmartin, who's the manager of the Lords of 52nd Street. But the big get was I was able to book time in Manhattan with Malcolm Gold and Mike Del Giudice. And Malcolm came in with one of Doug's basses, and Mike sat down at the piano, and we talked about, Doug, and then they played some music with me. But this was when we were just starting out. I had borrowed my girlfriend Alexis's Yeti mic in general to do the podcast. And like I came up with a luggage rack full of like the most ridiculous assortments of wires, laptop, what's it, in-ear monitors, whatever else. And then we have like Michael I think you were on my tablet. I think I had the tablet separate. So then we have like, it's almost like the Community episode where it was like a guy on a tablet on like a scooter, like remote. Yeah. Yeah, we just had like the disembodied head of Michael. So I set all this up, and it was an amazing, hour or so session. And we listened back to the audio, and I realized like the Yeti mic didn't pick up shit. It just, whatever it did, it reverted to like the laptop's like internal microphone, which is like the bane of Michael's existence, is the internal microphone on whatever laptop I have, because like at some point, like a wire will come out and it would switch over, and we wouldn't know until we listened to it. He'd be like, dude, it happened again, Yeah. And that was the first time, an eerie portent. So I got a buddy of mine who's like a real deal studio engineer. I'm like, I will pay you many American dollars to repair this for me. He did the best he could. Yeah. Because I was like, there was no way we could have re-recorded that.
Yeah, it was mid-February, and Malcolm lived in town, and they were gigging and stuff like that. But what was it, Mike? You caught Mike. It was like right the night before a garden show. So he came in, right. I got him like coming off the plane or something crazy. The way that we got that interview was wild, because we hadn't even put out an episode yet. We were recording in advance, and I put out on Facebook on Billy Joel Retold. I'm like, hey, any bass players out there, like big fans of Doug, can you speak to his technique and his style, things like that? And Mike Del Giudice is like, yeah, he was my mentor. And I'm like, you messing with me? Is this really going to happen? And the dominoes just fell from there, like everything else came right through. Yeah. So that was wild, and a testament to what a cool guy Mike is, like what a down to earth, awesome guy. He was just like, yeah, no, I will travel, to an undisclosed location. To meet a stranger off the internet.
Yeah.
On camera.
Right. It sounds like a Law and Order episode.
I'm Chris Hansen.
Yeah. Right. What are you doing here? You asking me or him? Oh man, how far we've come since then. I've been saying that this has been the year of the lanyard for me, and this isn't even all of it. So for audio, this is the red bracelet we got when we saw And So It Goes in Sag Harbor. This is the lanyard we got when Michael and I saw Metallica on Long Island that same weekend. for that same week. This is from when I went to, the hell was the name of it? The Evolutions Podcast Conference in Chicago. And I'm missing, well, not missing, it's back here somewhere. I also have, our press lanyards from the Beacon for the premiere. You got that one, yeah. I think mine's in my bedroom, but I look at it. I have it on my ceiling instead of a Cindy Crawford poster. Now I got to fix my zoom here. There we go, my focus. And the one thing I don't think we got a lanyard for, although I should write them, was going down to Kentucky, and I'm seeing the Banged Robot show. Yeah. I should ask them just to make one up for me so I have one. But it's been quite the year of travel, and I am out of focus, and that's pissing me off. Hold on a second. Nah, it's screwed. My New Year's resolution is more consistency on camera. This is killing me. No, man, we did a lot of stuff this year. We saw each other more this year than I think any other
combined, probably.
Yeah. What was it, 3 times? Prior record was 2.
Yeah, and it's been quite a year. I mean, we talked about it a couple of episodes ago. We're like, yeah, we haven't slept since July, and that's kind of how it feels. But it's been all great. The culmination of all our involvement in the documentary, and yeah, just to get to experience all that this summer. And I know you're trying to dial it in again.
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna be editing. I'm gonna be all pissed off again. Go on. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. No, you're fine. But yeah, the oh, I see that. No apologies with that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, kicking off our travels this year in February with the Robbie Cosenza tribute and benefit in Lexington was amazing. And it's a good reminder for you and I to touch base with those folks, because I felt like we landed in a really amazing community there. And yeah, Rebecca, Kristen, and Tom, they all just took us in and like made us feel like we've known them for 30 years.
To sum this up for those of you who aren't like on every episode, like you're reading X-Men from the early 90s here, when they used to reference the other issues. Mid to late 2024, we got hit up by friends of Robbie Cosenza, a fan of the podcast who had written to us years ago. He had passed away from cancer, and he was a well-established recording and touring musician based in Lexington, Kentucky, and his friends, former bandmates, colleagues, everyone, they were putting together a big benefit show where they would finally debut his record that had never come out, that he had recorded. Would you guys want to come down and MC it, because he was such a big fan of the podcast? We were like, yeah, this is a wild ask, but hell yeah. And we didn't know what to expect, but everybody down there was really cool. The show was amazing. 300 plus people packed into this club. Just a cavalcade of musicians playing his music. Rebecca running around with the headset on, keeping everything as close to on schedule as an event like this could ever be.
Yeah, for real.
People shooting the documentary in the green room /
band hang and
band hang. So we met Callie Matthews, who was one of the videographers on it, who ended up being my camp buddy when I went to the podcast conference, because she was there too with people she works with. So we were there for like a couple of days, and had some people to hang out with. And that record's great. I was just spinning it again the other day. So that was an amazing kickoff to the year. And then of course, the next big thing was the documentary, which we had known about for a while and kept it under wraps. And then it got announced, and then everything shifted into high gear.
I tell you, with that, it was such a weird wearing of two hats thing. If you've listened to any of the episodes about it, Jack, myself, and our great friends and amazing partners on the podcast, Jeff Fisher, Jenny Norderby, the 4 of us were brought in as archival consultants on the film. And so, we had been working with the directors, Jessica Levin and Susan Lacey, and their whole team as they were putting this film together, putting together assets, helping with timelines. I mean, it was 2.5 years of a lot of back and forth and questions and things like that. So suddenly when we get the word that, hey, it's coming in June, it's happening. We have a premiere date. It's going to be Tribeca. And so suddenly it went from like helping them get this together in the ways we could to you and I having to shift into podcast mode now of like, okay, now as a podcast, how are we going to cover this? And so it was a really interesting time to like switch into that and run with that for a few months.
And then like right after that was this like torrent of podcast interviews we did. Starting, wasn't it that weekend or the next weekend with John Small? Hadn't you like just left?
It was like immediately after.
We were like just catching our breath, and the Hassles were being inducted into the Long Island Entertainment Hall of Fame. And we got in touch with them again, and they said, "Hey, do you want to talk to John Small?" And we said, "Sure." We were planning on just talking to him for a few minutes about the Hassles. He gives us like a whole episode's worth of stories of producing music videos over the last 20 to 30 years, which became its own thing. And then as they were doing the press rounds for the documentary, we talked with Steve Cohen, who, we've talked to a bunch, obviously, but we really sat down with him about the documentary. We formally sat down with Susan and Jessica to talk about the documentary. We talked to John Jackson. We talked to Brad Lee again. That was when we really weren't sleeping, when it was like we would record these. And then I was trying to get just the interviews out on YouTube because, if we followed our usual schedule, these would have all come out like way past the media cycle. So it was like just staying up like all night, like trying to edit, film along with audio and crank those out. And then I don't know, next thing I knew it was Halloween.
Right. As we were working through the press cycle on that, as we were talking with John and Brad, they're like, "Hey, by the way, in like 2 weeks, there's going to be a companion album to go with this. That's 150 tracks, all of this unreleased material that we're finishing up mastering now. So basically, like, if you're airing this in a couple of weeks, we can talk about it." And so suddenly we also had this huge mammoth companion compilation to like digest. It's like 7.5 hours long. It's longer than the documentary.
Some things we had heard before, through all our digging, and things that we had heard snippets of only in the documentary that we were finally even hearing for the first time all the way through.
The Boathouse sessions from Shelter Island had been floating around for years and various poor quality. To actually get Brad's actual mixes straight from his DAT tapes, to get, Attila tracks with vocals on a Billy Joel release for the first time.
Right.
To get brand new mixes of Cold Spring Harbor tracks. I mean, this was some of the most exciting audio that I've really heard out of a Billy release in a long time.
And then the last thing we did together was our excursion to Long Island, which was just wild. So we were recording an episode, or just about to, and I get an email from Sag Harbor Cinema saying that, hey, they're going to do a showing of the documentary in full with the directors there. And as we're planning this trip, Michael mentions offhand, "Hey, funny enough, Metallica's playing the next night at this very like special intimate show on Long Island to celebrate the launch of their Sirius XM radio station. I'm going to enter. What the hell? Enter for tickets," because they weren't selling them. He wins the tickets. Our itinerary is now Michael flies in one day. We're going to go to Manhattan the next day, meet up with Bradley for a little while.
Yep.
Continue on to Long Island, go watch the movie. The next day, go see Metallica, and then drive back to Philadelphia. Like, you couldn't have planned this better. And I actually owe these people an email still. This is how like behind I am. So if they ever hear this, like, you'll hear this first. And then, as my apology, there used to be a band out on Long Island called For Whom the Bell Jolls. Yes. And the whole conceit was it was all Billy Joel songs done in the style of Metallica. Their t-shirts were fantastic. It was like the Ride the Lightning shirt, but instead of the electric chair was a piano. And like it was like the Master of Puppets, but the piano was all broken up and stuff. So I reach out to their old Facebook page. It's been defunct for like nigh on a decade. I'm like, is there any chance anybody has like a couple of these t-shirts left in a cardboard box in the basement or something? And I didn't hear. And then I looked up their drummer, and she has gone on to be like a high profile touring drummer. So I lightly stalked her, so to speak, in a very professional manner.
Of course.
I said, "Hey, drummer to drummer, blah, blah, blah," and she put me in touch, and the guy was like, "No, we don't have anymore." I'm like, damn it. I would have loved nothing more than to walk into both of those events with our For Whom the Bell Jolls. I should have asked him for the old graphic, and I would see if we could like just silk screen our own.
For sure.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
But it's a shame. I still owe them emails saying thanks anyway.
I've been lucky. I've seen Metallica a lot of times and some really special gigs, but never an invite-only show where you could only win tickets. Obviously, the Billy Joel screening was in Sag Harbor, like you said, and this Metallica show was behind a small club under a huge like wedding tent in Amagansett, which is the town over from Sag Harbor, like a 10-minute drive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to enter this thing. I said, let's be prepared to extend a day out there.
Right.
Probably not going to happen, but like, who knows? And sure as shit, I get an email from the Metallica Club saying, congrats, you're a winner. We got ourselves a pair of tickets for this show. Yeah, everything changed at that point.
Yeah, it was wild. It was my first time seeing Metallica. It was great. Yeah. No, it was amazing seeing them that close up. You know, they really put on a great show still.
It was pretty wild because I remember too going into it, I'm like, you know me, it's like my travels are always like, I don't sleep much. You know, it's when you're flying cross country. I did a red eye because I think I arrived at like, I walked in the door at your house at like 7 a.m. after flying all night.
Yeah.
Took a cat nap and then we were on the road that night to start heading to New York and we couldn't get into our bedroom in the Airbnb.
I was just about to, no, let me tell you. Have you heard the term shitification yet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is, I'm not even going to go into it. Just Google shitification. Everybody should just find this out for themselves. But like, it's just everything's such a pain in the ass. Everything that was awesome back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean a decade ago, is just going to crap. Airbnb being one of them, right? So it used to be like, man, you just find a cheap room somewhere or it works out. Now people run these like half-ass boarding houses and stuff. So I reserve an Airbnb outside the city in Jersey and it was cheap. And I'm like, well, everybody says it's clean. That's really all we care about because we're rolling in at like midnight. And the idea was just let's not battle traffic in the morning from Philadelphia all the way to New York City. Let's just get to North Jersey.
Yep.
So we roll. I told the host, like, we're rolling in at like midnight, you know, just an FYI. I don't know if this is your house, you know, because I've done that before. I've rented a room in somebody's house and been like, I'm coming in at like 1 a.m. Is that going to be okay? They said, yeah, just be quiet. Here's the lockbox, you know, the combination. So this is like 3 locks, a bunch of I'm beat tired. I'm trying to like go through all these instructions. We get in the first one. We get in the second door. We get to the room. No dice. There is no more combinations. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. Because it's midnight, right? Yeah. And there was like a couch. And I'm like, and you know me, I'm a hobo. So I'm like, well, F them. I'm sleeping on the damn couch. Like, somebody has a problem with it, they could call the host. And the host could call me. And I'll tell them, well, you didn't give me the goddamn combination. And I got my hat down over I peek out from under my hat. And Michael's just sitting there like straight up. And I'm like, all right. I'll go find another hotel.
It probably wouldn't have been as bad if I had slept the night before.
Yeah.
I think that was probably why I'm like, I can't do this 2 nights in a row.
You also have higher standards than me. And by higher, I mean standards.
That's the other thing I learned that trip. What? The 23-minute alarm.
Yeah, we were hanging out before the Metallica show on this really nice main street on Long Island. You know, little would you say hoity-toity? I'd say a bit hoity-toity.
A little on the hoity-toity side.
Not
so, but there's a record store. So not at a pizza joint. Yeah. So not enough to where like you can walk down the street in your Metallica shirt and feel weird.
My body knows at some point I got to take a nap. So we're sitting, we get some pizza. We're sitting in this like kind of courtyard sort of thing, but it was like right on the street. So I'm like, dude, Michael, I got to take a nap, man. So we go like further back in the courtyard. So I'm not like right on the, like right near the sidewalk at a picnic table, you know, and it was like a little fire pit. There wasn't a fire going, but you know, there was some lawn chairs. The same thing. I just threw my hat down, set the alarm for 23 minutes. And I was like, all right, Mike, I'll see you in 23.
Out. Like literally out.
My body knows to get sleep when I give it to it.
It was crazy and impressive all at once. I was like, this is insane. But I respect it.
Yeah. And then the alarm goes off and I shake it off. I'm like, all right.
And you're like, all right, what were you doing? Yeah. Exactly.
So this is our little end of the year odds and ends recap thing, whatever. So over the summer, I decided to do an episode just for video only about Brian Wilson when Brian Wilson passed away because it happened. And I know a few people that are huge Brian Wilson fans. And I said, what the hell? Let's do something for that. Afterward, I felt like an ass because I couldn't do one for Sly Stone, who died pretty much almost like within a week. And it occurred to me that their trajectories were very similar in some ways, but then very different in that they were both like real songwriting and studio pioneers in the late 60s, and then just kind of spun out mentally Brian Wilson kind of made it back. Sly didn't really in the same way, but I didn't have like the same people around that could talk about Sly Stone, nor could I talk about Sly Stone that well. It was a companion episode that I never got to make, which was a shame. So I will tell everyone you should just watch Questlove's documentary on Sly Stone, The Myth of Black Genius, which is on Hulu, I believe. So that just happened to come out this year too. Great documentary. But anyway, since this is the end of the year, we decided let's put that video only episode on here, so we can talk a little about another great musical luminary of the mid to late 20th century. And when we come back from that, we're going to talk about what we know is in store for us all in terms of the podcast and the Billy Joel world in 2026. Welcome to a special side episode of Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. Michael's away, and I wanted to cover something timely, so I have some special guests with me today. We're taking a quick break from Billy Joel today to remember Brian Wilson, co-founder of the Beach Boys, and the creative force behind their sound and the majority of their most well-known songs. Born June 20th, 1942, he passed away this week on June 11th, 2025. Brian's widely been considered a genius for decades, thanks to his beautiful, memorable melodies, sophisticated vocal harmonies and arrangements, and creative uses of the recording studio as an instrument. I personally put Brian in a small group of rock and pop composers who wrote sophisticated and sometimes complex pieces that still sounded as simple and accessible to everyday listeners. So to commemorate Brian's passing, I wanted to take a quick look at one of the Beach Boys' most enduring songs, God Only Knows. It was released on the album Pet Sounds, which itself is considered a landmark record in 1966. Spin magazine posted a recording of just the vocals for the last minute or so of the song. And listening to it, I remembered how much I loved the song, and like we do with many of Billy's works, I wanted to break it down and see what I enjoyed so much about it. To do that, I'm joined today by two good friends. Frank Gana is a Philadelphia guitarist, bass player, singer, and songwriter. We currently play together in the Michael Goldman Band, the classic rock cover band. And guitarist and videographer Colin Tabor is originally from Philly, but has been based out of New York City for decades. Colin's active with a few bands in the New York area, particularly in the Grateful Dead tribute band space. He plays with the Ripple All-Stars, Dead Reckoning, and the Jamburitos, along with doing some studio work and producing videos. To prepare for this episode also, I listened to the podcast Strong Songs. Host Kirk Hamilton did an amazing analysis of God Only Knows back in 2020. And since his analysis is really deep, I thought this would be a nice stepping stone into that work. I had reached out to Kirk, and unfortunately he wasn't available in time to join us, but he said we can reference his episode as much as we want. So I'll talk a little more about it later, and I strongly suggest you all check out his podcast Strong Songs and this episode in particular. And with that, I can go off script and sound like a human being again. Guys, thanks for joining me, especially on short notice. We've all played together. We've all jammed some Beach Boys songs at Real's in Northeast Philly on many a Sunday night. I thought you guys would be a great combination to bring on to go through this song. But before that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about like how we all discovered the Beach Boys and what made them stick. So going first, I remember hearing I Get Around first on the radio with my dad, and I remember how much it just jumped out to me. I'm listening to it now, a good 60 years out. It definitely sounds like an oldie, but I remember even in the 90s, the production of it sounded modern. It was just so energetic, and it really just caught you. And so at some point, I knew the song Wouldn't It Be Nice, and we were in the CD of the Month Club, one of those mail order ones, and I saw Pet Sounds, and it had Wouldn't It Be Nice. If I was in like 5th or 6th grade, I'm like, oh, let me get that one because it has this song I know. And I think it was a great introduction because I didn't know it was an important record. I just listened to it because it had this hit I knew. All those great arrangements, all those great melodies seeped into my subconscious without having the baggage of knowing that, oh man, this is important stuff and I should listen to it as important stuff. And that way I kind of heard it the way it was heard when it came out. Here's another Beach Boys record. And oh my God, in retrospect, this is a landmark piece of 20th century music.
The Beach Boys, I was definitely aware of them, as I was kind of as a youngster coming up into the music scene. My parents were big listeners of the late 60s music. And so this was among the music that I heard. What I remember is sort of the competition between the Beatles and the Beach Boys, reading about that, how Brian Wilson and some of the Beach Boys' work inspired the Beatles to do something like Sgt. Pepper. And then in turn, the Beach Boys were inspired by that to go further and further into whether you want to call it chamber pop or you want to call it something else, it was revolutionary at the time. And maybe that fact is a little bit lost on today's listeners just because they didn't live through it or near it. I was 5 years old in 1968, 6 in 1969 when these records came out. I was really very young, but I was influenced by it a great deal.
I remember as a kid, kind of driving around a family car. We'd always have Oldies 98 on Philly station, 98.1. They would always play them a lot. And I would always ask my parents, like, oh, who's that? And like, oh, that's the Beach Boys. And the first thing that stuck out with me is obviously the vocal melodies, the harmonies. It just sounded like otherworldly. They kind of had what I guess I would call a resurgence of pop culture in like the 90s. It seems like they were everywhere. So I remember we'd be sitting down watching Full House. The Beach Boys go on Full House. Or watching Home Improvement. They show up on Home Improvement. Wilson, Tim Allen's neighbor with the fence, turns out he's the lost brother who never was good enough to be in the band. So it seems like they just kept popping up throughout my childhood. I remember we watched The Wonder Years. The one episode, it ends with I Get Around playing. And, Wayne, his older brother, and Fred Savage is like chasing him to get into his car. So they were always kind of there, and I was always kind of fascinated with them. But everything changed, and I believe 1999, ABC ran like a mini series. It's called An American Family, the Beach Boys, and it was like the whole story. The beginning, they kind of went into Brian Wilson, like the genius stuff, and then kind of like how he kind of had like, I don't know if you'd call it a meltdown or whatever after Pet Sounds and the Smile session. So it went into all that stuff. That's when I kind of took like a deep dive into like the whole Brian Wilson thing, the story. I kind of became obsessed with the story of him, the songwriting, started taking piano lessons. I started like really getting involved in like the songs and like the structures and stuff. So pretty much ever since then, I would probably been around 7th, 8th grade. That's when I really got like deep into them. And it's been like that ever since.
They were on Full House a bunch of times too, right? Doesn't John Stamos have a connection with them anyway?
Yeah, I think Stamos actually was one of the producers in that movie I was telling that we're talking about on the. But to get back to the Home Improvement thing, it's funny because when they show up, Wilson's like, "These are my brothers, the Beach Boys," and then Tim Allen starts naming like, oh, "That's my favorite song." He starts naming every song, but it's none of them that they sing. He's like, "A little GTL." They're like, "That's Janet." Like, it's funny.
Yeah.
Then he goes, "Well, the only other one I like is Little Deuce Coupe, and I know you didn't write that." It's funny.
They're a huge influence on everybody around them. That they created the California sound. Interesting story. I guess in 1971, the Beach Boys were looking to sort of modernize their image a little bit. If you can imagine what modernization might have looked like in 1971, they were kind of on the outs, and the Grateful Dead actually invited them to perform with them at a concert. The two groups played some songs together on stage. Jerry was a huge fan of the Beach Boys, as everybody was in that day.
Let's talk about the song God Only Knows. It was one that stuck out to me a bit on Pet Sounds, although I was always partial to Here Today and I'm Waiting for the Day. Those were two that like just always jumped out a little more. You could mention Here Today or I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, and you had to be really talking to a Beach Boys fan for them to catch those, but you started noticing God Only Knows showing up maybe in a commercial or a movie and people knowing that one. This was recorded with the Wrecking Crew, famous LA session musicians. How long had the Beach Boys been working with the Wrecking Crew versus doing the instrumentation themselves or using other session musicians?
As far as I know, it was kind of a gradual process. Brian stopped touring, I'm going to say around all summer long when that came out. But I think around that time, maybe right after that, they stopped touring. That's pretty much when he did Summer Days and Summer Nights, and Today, Beach Boys Party, which is kind of to appease the record label, and then the Pet Sounds, obviously. He would kind of use them for some songs, from what I understand, and other songs, he would just have just the band do, maybe at first. It went from that to like, he was just using them for every song. But even in Pet Sounds, there's stories that stuff like That's Not Me, he would do these intimate sessions when the Beach Boys came back from tour, which he would just have them play on it. So I think some of that is just the actual Beach Boys playing on it, maybe with one or two Wrecking Crew members. And there's other stuff that's just all wrecking through, straight through.
One of the interesting things I thought about Pet Sounds, something I keyed into years and years ago, the first thing I noticed was like, hey, wait, there's no drum set on this album. Like nobody's just playing a bass drum, hi-hat, and snare. It's all weirdly orchestrated. My impression going by is that obviously the Wrecking Crew could play almost anything, but I don't think they were called on that often, at least for pop records, to get that orchestrated or that weird. Like when you think about Phil Spector stuff, it was still pretty straight ahead, right?
The LA studio scene was full of people that could do everything. The Wrecking Crew were on so many records. I mean, and the people that were in the Wrecking Crew are all legendary in their own right. You've got Glenn Campbell, who came out of that, went on to become a major star. There's other people like the drummer Hal Blaine who didn't, but they were all, they're all on so many hundreds and hundreds of records. There's a lot of nice interviews out there with some of those cats where you hear some of the stories.
There's a documentary that's been in my queue forever on Netflix too, just about the Wrecking Crew.
Watch it too.
Yeah. And Pet Sounds is a great example of Brian's idiosyncratic arrangements that were so unique. A couple years later, we'll start getting prog, and we'll start getting Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Jethro Tull. And yes, and as much as I love them, it's so obvious that they're playing at the height of their abilities, especially on their most complex work. And then something like Pet Sounds, it's not like they're doing fancy runs or anything, but it's just so meticulously put together.
There's some cool YouTube videos out there of like the audio of like those sessions. Songs will start off with Hal Blaine just playing like a drum beat, and Brian just stops and he's like, Hal, no drums. Just come in on this beat or this, or,
They're coming in and out, and, the phrases that gets used a lot is chamber pop. And it's just that idea that like, this could be classical music if they weren't played on rock instruments with pop lyrics. And God Only Knows, obviously, is a great example of it. It starts off, and I got this from that podcast, Strong Songs. One thing Kirk Hamilton was pointing out was how often you're hearing instruments doubled. So it's like it's a harpsichord and a piano and an accordion and something else, and they're blended together. So you don't realize it's two instruments combining to make a new, unique sound. And of course, this was at the advent of synthesizers, but they weren't using synthesizers at this point. So somebody had to like envision the sound they had in their head and then figure out what combination of acoustic instruments is going to produce that timbre. Did you ever hear, Frank, like you were saying, those videos, things on YouTube of like the sessions? Did you ever hear the ones where Brian will like keep stopping them and he'll be like, no, wait, the harpsichord has to come up, or this or that? Yeah.
It's hard for us to imagine in today's scenario where we're full of automation, we're producing everything with computers. We're able to adjust every mix element exactly the way we want in our own sweet time. In those days, running a mix was actually a performance. You'd have, 2 or 3 or 4 people at the mixing board, which was huge, 64 channels or whatever, maybe not in the Pet Sounds days, but eventually, you had to adjust the panning, the volumes, the relative volumes of the instruments in real time to get that mix. And that was basically carved, onto either a lacquer, an actual record, or onto a master tape. But either way, the mix itself is a performance.
We've talked about that a bit on this show when we have someone like Brad Lee or Larry Frank on, talking about working with Phil Ramone, how the rule was you always had to have your hand on the sliders on the board because you didn't know what was about to happen. And of course, Brian Wilson was really at the forefront of pushing the boundaries of that. So the song starts off pretty low key.
There's a chord progression that's really the same chord progression that we get at the end with the repeated 4-chord pattern.
The song starts off with an accordion. And like you said earlier, the accordion is probably dubbed with something else playing the same exact part. I'm not sure what it is. But then, I'm almost certain it's a French horn that plays on top of that for the whole intro.
And what always caught me at the beginning was the fact that the song starts off with the line, I may not always love you. Makes you think like maybe this is not going to be a love song. Like maybe this is one of those songs about somebody that's going to leave or they're having doubts. But, obviously just in that stanza that gets reconciled immediately, I may not always love you, but as long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. The elements start seeping in little by little. Some congas come in, some more percussion. Carol Kay, a famous session bass player, she comes in with some strong lines.
It's an AABA form where the A is basically a verse and B is typically the bridge. That's where the sort of instrumental comes in and the ooze. And then it comes back to that same 12-bar melodic phrase. That is the genius of the song in terms of what makes it so amazing to everybody, in my opinion, and coverable, because in this 12-bar phrase, he's hitting 2 or 3 other key centers besides the main key that the song is in. Just for one chord. Then it goes back, then it comes to another chord. And this is maybe hard to communicate to people who are not versed in harmony exactly, but you'll feel it as sort of shifting and a lot of sort of ground being covered and going left and right. And the movement of it is just so beautiful. He's using the melody, and melody is a whole mysterious thing, in some ways. There's good notes, there's bad notes. We know a good melody when we hear it. We know a bad melody when we hear it. They can both be created with the same set of rules, like it's in this key, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't explain anything about why it's great. That's the magic of music. But from the beginning, the very first chord in there where, I may not always love you, that line is in a different key than the intro was in, right? So immediately he's taken us out of it. And then he kind of brings us back in on Stars Above You. And then, you're going back out of it. And then there's that beautiful thing on, I'm sorry, I'm referring to the music as I sit here. But you'll never need to doubt it. That chord there, it's beautiful. An A minor that he rolls into, or there's a lot of ways to describe the chords. The other thing that happens in the song is that the bass line is alternate bass notes almost all the way through. It's just something you feel, but as a musician, I'm gonna look, there's an A minor chord, but he's actually playing a C in the bass or something like that. It's a part of the chord, but it's emphasizing a different part of the sound of the chord, if that makes sense. And it creates like this chromatic line on the bass that just sort of stitches things together in yet another way that is sort of under your level of conscious. It's almost subconscious that you're not going to really hear it unless you listen for it. But it makes the parts weave together in just such a beautiful way.
When you listen to most pop music, whatever chord you are playing, for the most part, it's usually you're playing a C major, your root note is a C. You might arpeggiate that, you might do a step part, but Brian Wilson, this is to me a classic music trick, which is whatever note you're playing, he uses a totally different root note, and somehow it just like has this crazy cool effect. Billy Joel does it a lot too. That's to me why the song sounds so cool, and it like kind of tugs at your heartstrings a little. It's that root note clash with the chord, but it's like it's so melodic. It like fits so perfectly. And if you try to play the God only knows chords and just play like whatever note you're playing and play that root, it doesn't have the same depth at all. So it's such a huge part of the song, that little. I hear it a lot in classical music.
The thing I would mention here is a term that classical folks who know theory will know is voice leading. It's the way that chords are stitched together and the way that we move from one chord to another or one harmony to another. It's like the art of it is moving to the closest note. So if you're on a C, can you move to a B or a D rather than jumping to some other note that's not a neighboring tone? You're looking for all the neighboring tones, and whether you're playing guitar or piano, you are trying to make those shifts in such a way that it just sounds seamless and it sounds musical and melodic. And again, the melody is so strong in the song, but then also you have the counterpoint, which is something we'll come to when we talk about the ending as well. The counterpoint of the bass line. That's typically what you have in music. You're going to have the harmony, which is, a bunch of chords, but then you've got the melody on top and the bass on the bottom, and how they move against each other creates a lot of the interest that you hear as a listener. It's subconscious, a lot of it, but that's how it works.
My understanding of voice leading, to piggyback on what you guys are saying, is that major and minor chords are made up of 3 notes each, right? And they're usually played in like sequential order, right? C, E, G, right? But if you played G, E, C, it's still a C chord, but it's out of order. So if you're voice leading, you're going to play the chord with the notes out of order so that you don't make that giant leap from like, G all the way to C. You'll find another note in the C chord that's closer to G and you'll move to that. And that gives it more of a flow. than that real obvious, oh my God, that guy clearly just changed a chord, right?
The way I illustrate it is almost like, okay, so you got your chord, it's got 3 notes like this. You want to move to another chord, like C to G. Well, C is down here and G is up here. But to get a good voice leading, you flip the chord around and then they go together better.
Frank, like you said, if you just sit there and play the chords down, it's not going to have nearly the same effect because you have to have those inversions and things like that. Now, you refer to this more towards, when you start putting extra notes like sevenths or, 11th, 13th, whatever on a chord. It's like, when you start off as a kid, you get the box of 8 crayons, and then you get older and you get to 16. And then if you're really good, you get to 64 crayons, and it's still like the basic colors, but how many more shades do you have that you can work with, and how much more rich of a scene can you paint?
It's amazing that there's only 12 notes, and yet we have so much variety.
It reminds me of something I read a long time ago about Gil Evans, who collaborated a lot with Miles Davis in the 50s and I think into the early 60s. So they did like Birth of the Cool, then they did Sketches of Spain, Miles Ahead. A lot of it was the marriage of like bop, small combo jazz stuff, like that fast soloing stuff that you think of when you think of jazz. I think a lot of people do. But then it would be orchestrated or have this classical element or big band feel. There was an article just talking about like how he could get obsessed with one note. Like, where is the note that I'm looking for? I have this whole thing, but there's one note that's missing and I have to figure out like the missing piece of this puzzle. And that seems like that's, where Brian Wilson was often going too. Like, what's the exact note I need with the exact effect to achieve the emotion that I'm trying to portray. So with that, we can get to the coda here, that last minute or so, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the bridge. That Strong Songs podcast, Kirk Hamilton gave a lot of airtime to this, and what he had to say about it unlocked another part of this song for me. And I'm going to summarize it really quickly. One, because you should all just go listen to his, and 2, because I'm not going to know everything enough to say it conversationally, how it's on that like sort of barbershop quartet sounding piece. First of all, he breaks out the different harmonies and he recreates them using different instruments, synthesized. So you can hear that although they sound so close and so blended, there are a couple of different lines that you'll never hear unless you really, really listen closely to find them on their own, because the voices blend so well and the harmonies are so well constructed. But I love this idea that Brian changes keys in the middle of that bridge, or at least, keeps shifting out of the original key. And so when they say God only knows at the end, it's in a different key, but then the next line is back in the original key. If you listen, sometimes you'll hear like a guitar solo go through the entire verse except for like the last line or two, and then the vocal just picks up that last line or two and leads into the chorus, right? But they just stick to the same chords. In this case, if you've ever felt like that God only knows after the bridge, it feels like offhand, it just doesn't sound the same. It sounds breezy. It sounds not as centered as the other times that they say it, but then it anchors back to what you're familiar with when it gets to that next line. And it's because he's singing, I believe, the same melody, God only knows, but under a different chord. But it's set up so that he hits that different chord, and then on the next one, it shifts naturally back into the original key. Something else I saw online was talking about how Brian's songwriting and arrangements were so good. It was telling a story through just the music, not only the words. Like I said, it starts off with this deft, I may not always love you, and then it reconciles that no, I'm not being distant. I'm not trying to keep you at arm's length. I'm actually like showing my devotion to you. He does it again in the second verse. He keeps flipping it around. And so you get to this bridge, and it's just such a walkabout. And it makes me think about like this idea of like this person like being so devoted, and then, testing it. Like maybe they go out into the world, right? If you love someone, set them free. If it's true love, they'll come back to you, that sort of thing. And he does this musically because it goes so many different places tonally. But then at the end of this journey, it comes back and doubles down on the God only knows what I would be without you. To me, what a great way of storytelling through just the music. And when you marry it with the lyrics, even if you don't realize exactly what's happening, you get a sense of it. So with that in mind, let's get to the last 54 seconds or so, what we simpletons would just call a breakdown, where the instrumentation finally drops out a little.
The same word, actually.
Yeah.
Go to the breakdown.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'll say what I love about this is just how the instrumentation builds back up from just very minimal instrumentation and one voice, and these other voices keep coming in with these other parts, and they're in a round. Drums come back and dum, just these like short rhythmic repeating patterns. And it doesn't get wall of sound like Phil Spector, but it really just layers like a tapestry.
Well, what happens at the end of the song is we end up on this short 4-bar phrase that just repeats and builds. As you said, it's like a tapestry. It's like a painting. It builds over time. And interestingly, we never actually hit the root of the song, like the key note, in that sort of rolling ball of fun. It just keeps on rolling around, and we hear the God only knows line repeated multiple times. That's where it's like a children's song from long ago, row, row, row your boat, except it's a lot cooler. We hear other elements come in. I think the snare drum is a good one, or whatever drum that is. Digga-da-bum, like you mentioned, that is like a part in the arrangement, just this little drum beat. And it's very loud relative to kind of other things. I mean, it's quite prominent. It's very crafted, the whole way that it's put together. You hear the one phrase again and again against itself, and you realize, oh, okay, harmonically, this kind of works, in a magical way. Counterpoint, right? Counterpoint's another classical word, right? Counterpoint is when you have one line, like I was saying before, the bass and the melody are counterpoint, right? They're going to be moving together up and down, and sometimes they move apart and then they come together again, and you can hear that. But counterpoint is, when you have more than one thing going on at a time, which is what we enjoy. We enjoy that sort of immersive feeling that it brings.
Last year, I went down like a Bach hole, and I was listening to the Goldberg variations like almost every day, like the Glenn Gould version, just trying to like understand what was going on. And so my understanding of counterpoint became, maybe in simpler terms, it's sort of the magic of it is that it can be two melodies happening at once. So you could take either one of those lines and it'll sound like a melody. Basically, you have a third song on top of it. You could break it apart into 1 and 2, and the third's there. What we call a round, now, if I have this correct, in classical terms, they will call that a canon.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That slower God only knows, like that sort of triplet feel. It's like God only knows, and there's God only knows, right? I think what they're doing, and this is the beauty of counterpoint, what Brian's doing here, is that it's the same melody, just about, but those notes have to match up because they're crossing at different times now, because he's doing the same melody at different lengths. So at any given point, that long held out note has to match the other notes that are going by.
That one part that you mentioned, God only knows, that's sort of a response, is the way I hear it. God only knows how I feel about you. You hear that, but then he does it again. So it sort of overlays, like, God only knows how I feel. And in the middle of that, the other one, it'll start again exactly the same. God only knows how God only knows. And they go together, and then there's da 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 da, God only knows. To me, that's a response, sort of a musical response, like a conversation, like the way you have musical phrases, but, it's the same theme, but stated slightly differently, transposed maybe. And that's a common device in counterpoint and sort of parts building like that.
There's some interesting Beach Boy lore on this song, the vocals, and especially the outro. First and foremost, if you're not that deep in the Beach Boys, you would assume it's Brian Wilson singing. Carl sings the song, not Brian. There's versions with Brian singing out there that he tried out. One of the album, it's Carl. The outro that we're talking about, the lore is that on the mono mix, it's Carl singing the God only knows what I be, the first part. And on the stereo mix, it's Brian singing it. For some reason, Carl went home for the day. That is like the Beach Boy lore. But either way, the outro we're talking about is Carl singing the God only knows what I'd be without. Once he hits the out, Bruce Johnson comes in, and Bruce Johnson replaced Brian on the road when Brian quit touring. He's been in the band ever since. He does that kind of echo repetition of that. And then Brian comes back in with that extended line, God only knows what I be, and goes falsetto without. And then it literally comes right back in with the beginning, and it just overlaps, and it's such a cool effect. the lore about who's singing. That stuff's always interesting to me to like dive into that.
Yeah, and we love too those little things like the mono mix has a different take than the stereo mix, something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they would do a separate take for mono versus stereo. I mean, I know Help Me Rhonda, that's like two completely different takes, right? The stereo or the single and the album, right?
Yeah, two totally different recordings.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah, was it like Revolution by the Beatles, same thing, like they had that electric version which was only the single.
Right, the faster version in a different key too. I mean, it's just, they mess around with it. Interesting story. There's a song by Bob Dylan called Forever Young, and it appears twice on the album that it came out on. He had pictured it as a fast song, and so the fast version, he was thinking about that all along, and one day the band cut just once. They cut it as a ballad. Producer was just dumbfounded, and he said everyone left the room with their jaws open, and we were kind of like, holy crap, this is great. And then Dylan was not planning to use that on the album, but the guy said, you really need to use this, and that's the version that everybody remembers. Sometimes the artist doesn't know, the public will tell you the truth.
Yeah, and of course that's something Neil Young did a bunch of times. Hey Hey My, and Tonight's the Night. He did that. He would do the same song acoustic at the beginning, electric at the end. Going back to like my little Bach excursion last year, like the Goldberg Variations starts and ends with the aria. And then I can't quite tie that back to God Only Knows, but we're putting Brian Wilson in some nice groups here, so we'll do it that way.
Just want to say we're going to give a shout out to Tony Asher, who did the lyrics for the album. He did a great job. Obviously, for this song that we're talking about, it's just a great song.
There's a reason that God Only Knows is one of the enduring Beach Boys classics. It's been covered by so many people. I mean, I can think right offhand of a couple great covers of it, but look around. It's really fun to hear the different versions that folks have done.
And with that in mind, we're going to end this episode with a version that Frank actually recorded, but back in 2020?
Yeah, during the COVID quarantine. You'd see how long my hair is in the video.
It was in your teen idol years, Frank. For all we were talking about, all the arrangements and the vocal harmonies, Frank did a fantastic solo version of it, just sitting at his piano at home. And I think that would be a great way to walk this out and, just kind of, say thank you to Brian Wilson for all the great music he's given us. This great music can be still listened to today. And even if we've heard it a million times, there's still something new to discover in them. You've devoted, so many episodes, obviously, to the genius of Billy Joel. And it's great to have the opportunity to look at another musical genius and celebrate the ways they were really able to expand the vocabulary of pop and rock music. So thank you, Frank and Colin. One more time, I really appreciate you guys jumping on. And we'll see you guys all soon.
I may not always love you, so long as there are stars above you. You never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. And God only knows what I'd be without you. If you should ever leave me, then life would still go on, believe me. The road could show nothing to me, so what good would living do me? And God only knows what I'd be without you. Still go on, believe me. The road could show nothing to me, so what good would living do me? God only knows what I'd be without you. And God only knows what I'd be without
Well, I'm really glad we got to finally include that in the audio podcast because it's a poignant tribute and it was a lot of fun for me to revisit it. So I hope you guys all enjoyed that as well. But yeah, here we are wrapping up another year, another episode, and we're looking forward to 2026. We have a lot of fun things coming down the pike. What do you say?
Yeah, we have some returning guests. We have at least one new guest from the Billy Joel world, or the Billy Joel extended universe, if you will. We have an episode coming up. We're doing something different because, we often talk about Billy in relation to some of his contemporaries. And so we're exploring that in a different way with some guests. I'm going to say this aspirationally. We're hoping to do more with video. I'm hoping I have the time to do this. I do have some ideas. Being involved with the documentary, even as tangentially as we were to the production of it, reignited my love for filmmaking, which I forgot about. As I've said here before, I've been, as a filmmaker for a little while in college, and I just got such a bug up me about editing again, just watching what the final looked like. And I just really keyed into how it was put together. And I think right after we got back from Sag Harbor, I bought a bunch of like classic editing books and stuff like that. And I've been poring over them. And so I'm hoping to supplement our podcast episodes with some video only content as well. Coming off the documentary, it seemed like such a peak. And it's like, where do we go from there? We kind of can't just go back to making the same episodes we were prior to that.
Yeah.
So let's see what we can do that's new now.
And then, on the Billy Joel world too, there's going to be some new releases. We got the scoop about Sparks coming out in 2026.
So Sparks was part of the run for Songs in the Attic. It was a small club in Long Island.
They had recorded stuff at a few clubs around the country, and they wanted to kind of recreate that. And Brian Ruggles was one of the owners of Sparks. So they did a night of shooting the music videos, like you said, and then another night of a full show. And sure enough, they had the full show.
So we're really excited. I mean, that's been one of the holy grails for Billy Joel fans, because we know those were just like killer shows at a small club at a time when Billy was not playing small clubs anymore. On top of that, the big thing about the documentary was that it really gave people a good idea of what's actually in the archives. John Jackson had started this year in 2025, putting out some more footage and things on Billy's social media. And we know that that's going to continue into next year. I know it kind of started and then stopped, but we have it on good authority that there's a lot in the hopper. There's a lot of backstage stuff, a lot of like behind the scenes footage that is going to continue coming out in 2026, along with at least, Sparks, which will be a great archival release.
Yep.
And we're hoping for more because what we're hearing from the camp is that Billy is way less precious about what he has in the vault. Billy has always been one to say, I want to be remembered by what I put out on the albums. If it didn't make the album, it's because I didn't want people to hear it. And it's a combination of loosening up on that and, the fact that we have YouTube and we have streaming music now. There's not that feeling of we have to charge people to listen to an artifact, a historical curio. People can check it out on streaming or on YouTube if they want. You're not charging people for another CD or a DVD or a box set. That alleviated that pressure of, man, this better be really, really good. This better be entertaining in and of itself if we're going to ask for people's money directly.
Because of going through the archives and finding original films and masters and everything like that, I think we've got a really great chance of some of these music videos and these live shows that we know so well getting incredible quality upgrades finally. Like if you look at the 52nd Street videos from 1978 and, and if you look at the current Uptown Girl video floating out there and then the footage that's in the film, it's 5 times better. It's huge. It's a huge difference. And, now that we've got the full Live from Long Island audio, it'd be great to see a visual upgrade of that. So I think there's all these things where it's finally, all this never before seen stuff and putting the best foot forward of the stuff we already know and giving it a much needed facelift. I think there's a lot of that coming.
So that's where we are ending 2025. We want to thank you all again from the bottom of our nerdy hearts for being along on this ride with us as we dig deep, as we like to say. This has been a great ride. It's been a continuingly great ride of celebrating our favorite artists, making new friends, just feeling like we're part of a community. We hope you do too. And if you do, by all means, tell us about it. shoot us an email, glasshousespodcast@gmail.com. What were your Billy Joel highlights this year? What are you looking forward to next year? Lavish some praise on us. Tell us what an awesome job we did, what your favorite episode was, or tell us where we sucked. I don't give a shit. Go for it.
That's
right. Or find us on the socials under Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast, or come bother us on our Discord server, the link to which will be in the show notes. And as I said, my dinner is ready.
Absolutely. So with that, we will bid you adieu and Happy New Year, friends. And we will see you in 2026 as we kick off year 7. And I'm more excited than ever. So we will sign off for now, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
We'll see you soon.